Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku became Superman's greatest rival instead of ally. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world had changed. It hadn't happened with a bang, but with a whisper that became a roar. A year ago, the sky had broken open, not with an invasion, but with a single, falling star that chose to stop. That star was a man. He called himself Kal-El, but the world quickly gave him a name that fit better, Superman. In a world teeming with quirks, from the mundane to the magnificent, he was something else entirely. He was an absolute. Izuku Midoriya, 15 years old and a connoisseur of the extraordinary, sat hunched in the glow of his monitor, the All Might posters on his wall seeming to watch him with fading, primary-colored optimism. On the screen, news footage flickered, a chaotic mosaic of awe and terror. A Category 5 hurricane, a beast of wind and water named Ophion, was about to make landfall on the southern coast of Japan. Evacuations had been frantic. Pro-heroes doing their best to manage the chaos, their quirks a frantic ballet against the inevitable. Then, he had appeared. A blue and red streak against a bruised purple sky. The footage, taken from a news helicopter being battered by gale-force winds, was shaky. Yet, Superman was a point of perfect stillness in the heart of the storm. He flew into the hurricane's eye, and for a moment, there was nothing. Then, the storm faltered. The news anchor, a woman whose voice usually held the unflappable calm of a seasoned professional, was stammering. We're getting reports from the meteorological agency. The wind speeds are dropping. It's impossible. The storm is dissipating. On screen, the swirling vortex of clouds began to unwind, the winds slowing from a world-ending scream to an agitated howl, and then to a mere breeze. It was like watching a god unspool a hurricane with his bare hands. The helicopter pilot's voice, raw and breathless, came over the feed. He's flying in a countercyclonic pattern. The speed, my god, the speed. He's creating a counter-pressure system. He's literally unwinding it. Izuku's pen, clutched in a white-knuckled grip, had stopped moving pages ago. His notebook, Hero Analysis for the Future, Volume 14, lay open. The page was dedicated to Superman. It was full of calculations that didn't add up, theories that bordered on theological, and questions that had no answers. Energy output required to counteract a storm of that magnitude exceeds the total combined output of every power-based quirk hero on the planet. By a factor of 10,000? 100,000? Flight is not propulsion-based. No visible energy signature. Seems to manipulate his own gravitational field. Violation of known physics. Heat vision, not plasma or fire. Pure, focused radiation. Temperature adjustable from warming a cup of tea to vaporizing steel. How? This was the source of the cold stone in his stomach. Izuku Midoriya had spent his life analyzing heroes, deconstructing their power, finding their limits, their clever applications, their weaknesses. It was how he, a quirkless boy in a superpowered world, participated in his own dream. He could understand All Might. The symbol of peace was the peak of human potential, a man who could punch with the force of a locomotive. It was an aspirational, albeit impossible, goal. But Superman was not a goal. He was a negation of the very concept of goals. Izuku clicked another link. A volcano in Indonesia, erupting without warning. Heroes were evacuating villages, their faces grim, knowing they were only managing the tragedy. Then, the blue streak. Superman had flown into the caldera, and with two impossibly powerful hands, he had forced the tectonic plates beneath to shift, sealing the fissure. The ground had shuddered for a moment, and then fell silent. He had stopped an earthquake. He had silenced a volcano. Awe was the first reaction. It was for everyone. But for Izuku, the awe was a bright, searing flash that gave way to a profound and cavernous darkness. It was despair. His dream, the one he had clung to through years of mockery, through the pitying looks, through the doctor's sterile diagnosis, was to be the one hero. To be a symbol, like All Might, who could save everyone with a smile. But how could anyone, even the mightiest quirk user, ever hope to be one in a world with Superman? He wasn't just another player on the board. he had overturned the entire game. The hero billboard charts, the heated debates about who was stronger, Endeavor or Hawks, best genist or edge shot, it all felt so pathetically quaint now. It was like children arguing over who had the biggest sandcastle while the tide, a literal ocean, stood personified beside them. All Might saved people. Superman saved the planet. All Might fought villains. Superman fought the laws of physics and won. The old, familiar hope that burned in Izuku's chest, the one that whispered maybe, just maybe, if you're smart enough, if you're brave enough, was sputtering, drowned by the sheer, effortless godhood he witnessed daily on the news. His dream wasn't just out of reach. It was an absurdity. A joke. He slammed his laptop shut, the darkness of his room feeling suddenly oppressive. The smiling face of All Might on his wall felt like a mockery. You too can be a hero, the poster proclaimed. No, you can't, a cold new voice in his head whispered. Not anymore. The position has been filled. By an alien who can bench press a continent. He needed air. Grabbing his yellow backpack, he bolted from his room, ignoring his mother's concerned call. The stale air of the apartment felt suffocating. He needed to walk. To think. To try and find a single ember of his dying dream to blow back into flame. The walk didn't help. The world outside was just as saturated with Superman. His face was on magazine covers at the convenience store, on cheap t-shirts, on newsstand displays hailing him as the symbol of hope. Children on the street weren't playing heroes and villains anymore. One kid would just stand there with his arms crossed while the others pretended to throw cars at him, which he'd effortlessly stop. Izuku walked with his head down, his path aimless, until a familiar gurgling sound echoed from the underpass ahead. He looked up, his blood running cold. A hulking, amorphous mass of green sludge was oozing from a manhole cover, two beady, frantic eyes swiveling in a semi-solid head, a medium-sized invisibility cloak. The villain gargled, its voice like sewage draining. Perfect. Izuku didn't even have time to scream. He was a target of opportunity, a vessel. The sludge lunged. Instinct, honed by years of being the weakest person in any given room, took over. He wasn't a hero, but he was a survivor. He swung his heavy backpack, full of notebooks and textbooks, in a desperate arc. The corner of a thick physics book connected with one of the villain's eyes. Gah! The sludge monster recoiled, a momentary break in its assault. It was all Izuku needed. He scrambled back, slipping on the damp concrete, and ran. He didn't look back. He just ran, his heart hammering against his ribs, the foul stench of the sewer clinging to him. He burst out of the underpass into the daylight, gasping for breath, before collapsing against the wall, his legs shaking too hard to stand. He had escaped. He was safe. But the relief was instantly washed away by a familiar, acrid smell. Ozone and burnt sugar. Explosions. Izuku stumbled toward the sound, drawn by the morbid curiosity that had defined his entire life. He pushed through a gathering crowd and his heart plummeted into his shoes. It was the same villain. And it had found a new cloak. Katsuki Bakugo. Kaken! The name was a strangled whisper on Izuku's lips. His childhood friend, his tormentor, was trapped, engulfed from the neck down in the viscous green sludge. Bakugo was fighting back with everything he had, his hands free, blasting off explosions in every direction. The blasts, however, were wild and uncontrolled, setting fire to nearby storefronts, and keeping the assembled pro-heroes at bay. Stay back! I've got a hostage! The villain shrieked, its voice now amplified by Bakugo's own throat. And his quirk is amazing. Keep away or I'll blow him up. The heroes were paralyzed. Kamui Woods couldn't get a grip with his lacquered branches, not with the fires. Empty Lady was too big for the narrow street. Death Arms was trying to clear civilians, his face a mask of frustration. Izuku's mind, a traitorous, analytical machine, went into overdrive, drowning out his fear. He started muttering, the words tumbling out of him in a low, frantic stream. It's no good. The villain's body is fluid, blunt force is just dispersing it, it'll just reform. It's using Kaken as a shield and a weapon. The explosions are powerful but they're oxygen dependent. The sludge is smothering the fuel source, that's why they're weaker than usual. The core, the real body, must be where the eyes are. A focused, high-pressure attack could disperse the core before it could reform. Or maybe something to rapidly change its viscosity, a coagulant, or a high-frequency sonic burst, something to separate it from the hostage. His analysis was perfect. It was useless. He was just a boy in a crowd, muttering to himself while his friend was suffocating. He saw Bakugo's eyes, wide with a terror Izuku had never seen in them before. It was the frantic, desperate fear of someone who had never known powerlessness until this very second. And in that moment, Izuku understood. He felt the phantom pain in his own chest, the memory of the sludge filling his mouth and nose. He couldn't stand there. He just couldn't. His legs moved before his brain could stop them. He broke through the police line, his worn red sneakers pounding against the asphalt. "Kid! Get back here! It's too dangerous!" Death Arms yelled. He didn't listen. He didn't have a plan. He just knew he had to do something. He ripped his backpack off and hurled it at the villain. It was a pathetic gesture, but it was all he had. The bag struck the villain's eye again, and a few notebooks spilled out. For a single, crucial second, the villain's grip on Bakugo loosened in surprise. Bakugo's mouth was free. He gasped a huge, ragged breath of air. "DKU? What the hell are you doing?" he roared, his voice hoarse. "I don't know," Izuku cried, his eyes streaming with tears. "My legs just started moving. You looked like you were asking for help." It was a suicidal, idiotic act. And it was about to get him killed. The villain, enraged, reformed its focus. A massive tendril of sludge shot out, not at Bakugo, but straight at Izuku. This is it, he thought. This is how it ends. Quirkless. Useless. A footnote in someone else's tragedy. He closed his eyes. There was no impact. Instead, there was a sound. Not a boom. Not a crash. It was the sound of a sudden, total displacement of air, a whoosh so clean and powerful it was almost silent. A gentle but firm pressure settled on the street, extinguishing the fires as if they were birthday candles. The crowd gasped as one. Izuku opened his eyes. Standing between him and the sludge monster, not a single hair out of place on his perfectly coiffed dark hair, was Superman. He hadn't flown in like a missile. He was just there. One moment he wasn't, the next he was. His red cape, impossibly pristine, settled around his shoulders without a wrinkle. He looked at the villain, his expression not of anger, but of mild disappointment. "Let the boy go," he said. His voice was calm, resonant, and held an authority that was absolute. The villain shrieked in defiance, tightening its grip on Bakugo. Superman sighed, a barely audible puff of air. He raised a hand, not in a fist, but with his palm open. From his lips came a controlled, directed gust of wind. It wasn't a hurricane blast. It was a focused jet of air, no wider than a dinner plate. It struck the villain's fluid body, not scattering it, but pushing it, peeling it away from Bakugo's form like a high-pressure hose stripping paint from a wall. The sludge monster writhed, trying to hold on, but it was useless. It was being systematically dismantled. As the sludge was forced away from Bakugo's face, Superman's eyes glowed, just for a fraction of a second, with a soft red light. There was a faint sizzling sound. Izuku, the analyst, realized what was happening. He wasn't burning the villain. He was using a low-intensity beam of heat vision to cauterize the point of contact between the villain and Bakugo's school uniform, flash boiling the thin layer of slime to break the adhesion without harming Bakugo in the slightest. In less than 3 seconds, Bakugo was free, collapsing to his knees, coughing and sputtering. The disembodied sludge villain, now a panicked, formless puddle on the ground, was scooped into a large soda bottle that one of the heroes had dropped. Superman put the cap on. It was over. The silence that followed was deafening. The pro-heroes stood frozen, their quirks unused, their expressions a mixture of relief and utter inadequacy. Bakugo was on his hands and knees, panting, humiliated, and Izuku was standing just a few feet away, trembling, looking at the man who had just solved an impossible situation with less effort than it took Izuku to tie his own shoes. Just then, a massive figure landed with a heavy thump a block away. "Have no fear, for I am here." It was All Might. He was in his muscle form, his trademark smile fixed on his face. But the smile faltered as he took in the scene. The fires were out. The villain was contained. The hostage was safe, and Superman was already being swarmed by reporters. All Might, the symbol of peace, the one hero of Japan, was too late. Superman handled the press with a gentle, practiced grace. He gave a reassuring smile that seemed to reach every person in the crowd. "The situation is resolved," he said, his voice carrying easily over the clamor. "The local heroes had the situation well in hand. I merely provided some assistance." It was a lie. A kind, diplomatic lie, but a lie nonetheless. They had been useless. Everyone had seen it. A reporter shoved a microphone in his face. "Superman! You saved the day again. What can we do to ever repay you?" He chuckled softly. "There's no need for repayment. Everyone can be a hero in their own way. Courage isn't about having the power to move mountains. It's about taking that first step, even when you're afraid." As he said this, his gaze flickered for a brief moment, passing over Izuku. It wasn't accusatory. It was knowing. Kind. And it was the single most devastating thing that had ever happened to Izuku Midoriya. The crowd erupted in cheers. "Superman! Superman!" All Might quietly helped Bakugo to his feet, patting him on the shoulder while a medical team checked him over. The one hero looked small in that moment, an afterthought at his own party. Izuku backed away, melting into the crowd. He felt nothing. Not relief. Not all. Just a hollow, echoing void. Superman's words, meant to be inspiring, were poison in his ears. Courage isn't about power. What a pleasant lie to tell the powerless. What did this god, who had never known a moment of physical fear, of true limitation, know of courage? His courage had gotten him nowhere. It had been a pathetic, suicidal gesture that required an alien deity to clean up. Superman hadn't seen a hero. He'd seen a child who needed saving. Izuku walked home, the city's celebration a dull roar in the background. The rain began to fall, a cold, miserable drizzle that soaked his thin jacket. He didn't even notice when his hero analysis notebook, the one he had clutched like a holy text for years, slipped from his numb fingers and fell into a gutter, its pages instantly bleeding ink into the grimy water. He didn't even look back. What was the point? There was nothing left to analyze. There was only one data point that mattered now. Humanity was obsolete. His dream wasn't just dead. It had been rendered irrelevant. A historical footnote. He, Izuku Midoriya, was a fossil from an era that had ended a year ago. He turned down a dark, empty alleyway, a shortcut he rarely took, needing the oppressive silence of the brick walls to match the emptiness inside him. The rain fell harder, plastering his green-black hair to his forehead. He saw his reflection in a murky puddle, a scrawny, drenched, pathetic-looking kid with eyes that had lost their light. This was him. This was all he would ever be. A soft hum broke the silence. Izuku looked up. A car, impossibly sleek and black, had pulled up to the alley's entrance, its engine utterly silent. It was a vehicle that screamed wealth and power, the kind he'd only ever seen in movies. The passenger door opened with a quiet, electronic hiss. A man stepped out, holding a large black umbrella that seemed to absorb the light around it. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than Izuku's family made in a year. His head was completely, flawlessly bald, catching the dim city lights like polished marble. But it was his eyes that held Izuku captive. They were a startling, piercing shade of green, and they radiated an intelligence so sharp it felt like a physical force. He looked at Izuku not like a man looking at a boy, but like a grandmaster studying a chessboard. "Izuku Midoriya," the man said. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the sound of the rain with perfect, clipped diction. He knew his name. Izuku froze, a new kind of fear, cold and sharp, replacing the hollow despair. Who are you?" The man took a slow, deliberate step into the alley, holding the umbrella over Izuku, shielding him from the downpour. The sudden cessation of rain on his head was a shock. "My name is Lex Luthor," he said, as if introducing himself was a mere formality. "I am the CEO of LexCorp. I was observing the incident earlier." A fascinating, if somewhat brutish, display. Izuku stared, dumbfounded. "Lex Luthor?" The billionaire industrialist? The man whose company was single-handedly revolutionizing global technology, energy, and medicine? What could he possibly want with him? I'm not here to talk about the alien, Luther continued, his gaze intense. I'm here to talk about you. While the world was captivated by the spectacle, the flying man in the cape, I was far more impressed by the quirkless boy in the crowd. Izuku's breath caught in his throat. Luther's lips curved into a thin, knowing smile. A focused, high-pressure attack could disperse the core. Something to rapidly change its viscosity. A high-frequency sonic burst. The explosions are oxygen-dependent. Your observations, muttered under your breath, were not only correct, they were strategically brilliant. You diagnosed the problem, identified multiple viable solutions, and even recognized the limitations of the powers on hand. You did all of that in under 30 seconds, armed with nothing but your intellect. He was quoting Izuku's own frantic muttering. He had been there. He had been listening. He hadn't been watching Superman. He had been watching him. That, Luther said, leaning in slightly, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, is true power, Mr. Midoriya. Not the ability to punch a mountain, but the mind that knows precisely where to strike to make the mountain crumble. The alien offers a solution born of brute force. You offered one born of genius. Izuku couldn't speak. A torrent of emotion swirled within him. Confusion, fear, but also, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, a flicker of something else. Validation. Someone had seen him, truly seen him, and had not seen a useless Deku. They had seen a weapon. Luther saw the conflict in his eyes and straightened up, his expression hardening into one of profound conviction. Look at you. Drenched, defeated. You saw that creature from the sky, and you didn't see hope, did you? You saw an ending. The end of human aspiration. The moment mankind stopped reaching for the stars because the stars had come down to condescend to us. He was speaking Izuku's own unspoken, terrifying thoughts. He was giving them voice, giving them weight. He flies around, a benevolent god in primary colors, and asks for nothing in return. And the world adores him for it. They grovel. They make themselves small. They forget that humanity's greatest achievements were not given to us. They were clawed for, bled for, taken. He gestured back toward the city. He saves them, and in doing so, he makes them children, forever dependent on a parent who is not their own. Luther took another step closer, his green eyes boring into Izuku's soul. The rain ran in rivulets down Izuku's face, mingling with tears he hadn't realized were falling. He offers them hope, Luther said, his voice a low, mesmerizing hum. A false, placating hope that keeps them weak. I'm offering you a chance to give them something better. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the suffocatingly quiet alley. I am offering you proof. Proof that humanity doesn't need to be saved by gods. Proof that a man, a single, brilliant, determined man, can stand as his equal. Or his superior. The world needs a symbol not of alien charity, but of human potential at its absolute apex. He extended a hand, not to shake, but as an offering. A sleek, black business card rested on his palm. That dream of yours, Mr. Midoriya? The one to be the one hero? It isn't dead. It's just become infinitely more difficult, and therefore, infinitely more worthy of a mind like yours. Izuku stared at the hand, then back up at the face of the most powerful man on earth. The despair in his heart was not gone. But now, it was mixing with something new, something dark, and sharp, and terribly, terribly alluring. It was the cold fire of ambition, reforged into a weapon of spite and intellect. Luther's thin smile returned, predatory and triumphant. He had him. I can give you the tools. The resources? The platform, he said, his voice barely a whisper against the rain. I can give you the power to surpass him. The black business card felt impossibly heavy in Izuku's trembling hand. It was made of some sort of matte-finished metal, cold to the touch, with silver lettering that seemed to drink the dim light of the alley. Lex Luthor. CO LexCorp. Below the name was a single, sleek icon, a stylized globe cradled within a circuit. There was no phone number. No address. It was a statement, not an invitation. Luther's words echoed in the desolate chamber of Izuku's mind, extinguishing the last vestiges of his despair and replacing them with a terrifying, crystalline clarity. Surpass him. It was a poison apple, a devil's bargain offered in a rain-slicked alley, and Izuku knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that he was going to take a bite. His dream hadn't just been to be a hero. It had been to be the greatest. Superman had made that impossible. Luther was offering to change the definition of the word. Why me? Izuku's voice was a raw whisper, barely audible over the drumming rain. Luther's thin smile did not waver. Because All Might looked at you and saw what you lacked. I look at you and see what you possess in abundance. A brilliant, analytical mind shackled to a desperate and ferocious ambition. Power can be bought, built, or borrowed, Mr. Midoriya. Ambition like yours, that must be forged in the crucible of absolute powerlessness. You are the perfect raw material. The perfect raw material. Not a person. A resource. A cold part of Izuku registered the dehumanizing language and found that he didn't care. He looked down at his own reflection in the puddle one last time. The crying, pathetic boy. The useless Deku. He took a deep breath, the foul city air tasting of rain and ozone, and made a decision. He would kill that boy. He would bury him right here in this alley. Okay, Izuku said, his voice finding a sliver of new, hard steel. He pocketed the card. Luther's smile widened, a subtle, predatory curving of his lips. Excellent. Your chariot awaits. The ride in the LexCorp sedan was a journey to another planet. The interior was silent, the roar of the city and the storm outside reduced to a distant memory. The seats were soft, supple leather, and the air smelled faintly of ozone and expensive cologne. Izuku, drenched and shivering in his cheap school uniform, felt like a stray animal brought into a palace. He stared out the tinted window as the familiar, worn-down neighborhoods of Muzurifa gave way to the gleaming, hypermodern architecture of Metropolis's central district, the city that LexCorp had all but built. He sent a single, terse message to his mother from his battered phone. I'm safe. I've been offered an incredible opportunity. It's a boarding program for a private tech institute. I'll explain more later, don't worry. It was a lie, but it was a necessary one. The first of many. He was already severing the ties to his old life, a surgeon cutting away a sentimental but useless limb. They didn't go to the iconic, globe-topped LexCorp tower that dominated the Metropolis skyline. Instead, the car descended into a series of unmarked tunnels, passing through multiple security checkpoints manned by guards in stark black uniforms with no insignia. Each checkpoint scanned the vehicle, the irises of its occupants, and their genetic markers. Finally, a massive blast door, thick as a bunker wall, slid open, revealing their destination. It wasn't a lab. It was a cathedral dedicated to science. The subterranean facility was vast, a cavern of polished chrome, white polymer, and holographic interfaces. Scientists in crisp lab coats moved with quiet purpose, their faces illuminated by the green and blue glow of data streams. Robotic arms assembled complex machinery with microscopic precision. In the center of the main chamber, suspended in an anti-gravity field, was a glowing, multifaceted crystal, a Kryptonian memory crystal, Izuku realized with a jolt, recovered from the wreckage of the scout ship Superman had arrived in. LexCorp was reverse engineering godhood. Welcome, Mr. Midoriya, Luther said, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. To the Prometheus project. The next 6 months were a blur of calculated, brutal transformation. Izuku's life was stripped down to 3 core functions: study, train, and build. His physical training began at 0400 every day. It was not designed to make him a mountain of muscle like All Might. It was designed to turn his body into a ruthlessly efficient machine. His trainer was a former special operations soldier named Stryker, a woman with a face like carved granite and eyes that saw only weaknesses. She taught him not to fight, but to end fights. He learned Krav Maga, focusing on disabling strikes to the throat, eyes, and joints. He learned Systema, the Russian martial art of fluid movement and absorbing impact. He spent hours in parkour simulations, learning to navigate urban environments with the grace of a phantom, his body becoming a vector of pure momentum. His diet was meticulously controlled, a precise formula of proteins, carbohydrates, and nootropics designed for maximum cognitive function and physical recovery. The soft, roundness of his teenage body melted away, replaced by the lean, dense muscle of a predator. His hands, once soft from endless note-taking, became calloused and hard. His intellectual training was even more intense. Luther gave him access to everything. Izuku devoured entire libraries of knowledge on engineering, physics, materials science, computer programming, and military strategy. He was not a student, he was a singularity, pulling in data at a terrifying rate. He sat with LexCorp's top engineers, men and women with multiple PhDs, and within weeks, he was no longer learning from them, he was leading them. The energy dispersal from the primary capacitor is inefficient, he'd say, pointing at a complex holographic schematic. He would then scribble a frantic series of equations onto a nearby light board. If we reroute the plasma conduit through a tertiary cooling loop and modulate the frequency to a 7.2 nanometer wavelength, we can increase power output by 34% while reducing heat signature by half. It's obvious. The seasoned engineers would stare, first in disbelief, then in dawning comprehension, and finally in something akin to fear. This boy, who looked barely old enough to drive, possessed an intuitive grasp of theoretical and practical science that was simply not human. But the bulk of his study was dedicated to a single subject, Superman. Luther had compiled every frame of footage, every sonic recording, every satellite image, every eyewitness account of the alien. Izuku spent days on end staring at the footage, his old fanboy or replaced by the cold, unblinking gaze of a hunter studying his prey. He charted Superman's flight patterns, calculated his reaction times down to the microsecond, and analyzed the energy signatures of his powers. He saw him stop a bank robbery. He relies on invulnerability. He faces threats head-on. No concept of flanking or misdirection. He saw him rescue a crashing plane. His focus is absolute on the primary objective. He ignores secondary threats until the main one is neutralized. A vulnerability. One could exploit that singular focus with a layered attack. He saw him talk to the press. He projects humility. He deflects praise. A psychological need to be perceived as non-threatening. This can be used to manipulate public perception. Frame him as powerful, yes, but simple. A tool, not a leader. Every night, Luther would join him, often over a game of chess. It was here that Izuku's philosophical reprogramming took place. Your move, Izuku, Luther said one evening, gesturing to the board. Izuku was in check. He was always in check. Compassion is a flaw in the heroic calculus, Luther continued, steepling his fingers. All might smiles to reassure the frightened. It's a placebo. A child's comfort. True reassurance comes not from a smile, but from the cold, undeniable fact of success. When the crisis is over, when the threat is neutralized with maximum efficiency, that is when people are truly safe. Their feelings during the event are irrelevant data. Izuku moved his knight, a desperate, defensive maneuver. But saving people isn't just a math problem. The fear is real. The hope he gives them is real. Luther captured his knight without a second glance. The hope he gives them is the hope of a pet for its master. It is predicated on their weakness and his strength. It fosters dependency. The trolley problem, Izuku, is not a moral dilemma for a true hero. It is a simple equation. You have a runaway trolley. You can divert it, killing one person on the alternate track, or do nothing and allow it to kill 5. The emotional, compassionate response is to freeze, to agonize over the choice. The correct response is to pull the lever. Instantly. The cost of saving the one is the death of 4 others. The goal is to minimize loss. It is the only goal that matters. Check. Izuku stared at the board. His king was trapped. He hadn't just lost the game. He hadn't even been playing the same one. A hero does not feel, Luther said, his voice dropping. A hero calculates. A hero acts. A hero wins. Anything else is sentimental failure. The culmination of his training, his study, and his new, brutal philosophy was the suit. It was designated Project Prometheus. Forged in the deepest, most secret levels of LexCorp, it was a masterpiece of lethal artistry. It wasn't a clunky mech. It was a form-fitting exosuit crafted from a carbon nanotube composite weave, matte black and gray, absorbing light like a patch of night sky. Thin, green lines of energy pulsed faintly through its structure, like veins carrying an alien lifeblood. The suit enhanced his strength and speed to low-level metahuman standards. My armor fiber bundles contracted with terrifying force, allowing him to punch through reinforced concrete. Kinetic accumulators in the boots allowed him to leap across rooftops and fall from 10 stories without injury. But that was its most primitive function. The true power was the helmet. When Izuku donned the helmet, the world dissolved into a symphony of data. The heads-up display, a direct neural interface he had helped design, overlaid reality with a constant stream of information. He could see structural weak points in buildings, the stress fractures in a steel girder, the trajectory of a ricocheting bullet before it was even fired. He could run facial recognition against global databases in less than a second. He could hack into any unsecured network with a thought. The suit's array of sensors analyzed biometric data, heart rate, adrenaline levels, micro-expressions, allowing him to predict an opponent's next move based on their own biology. It was the physical manifestation of his analytical mind, a weaponized version of the muttering boy in the crowd. He chose the name himself. All Might was a symbol. Superman was a symbol. He would be something more. He would be the peak. The final word. He would be Apex. His debut came on a cold Tuesday in November. The Royal Flush Gang, a team of high-profile mercenary villains, had chosen Metropolis's new Central Maglev station for their coming-out party. They were professionals, a step above the usual street-level thugs. King and Queen, the masterminds, Jack, a swordsman whose blade was a focused energy arc, 10, a hulking brute with enhanced strength, and their trump card, Ace, a 10-foot-tall robotic enforcer. They had taken control of the station during rush hour, trapping hundreds of civilians and demanding a $1 billion ransom. The police had formed a perimeter. Pro-heroes were en route. The situation was escalating. From a rooftop a kilometer away, Apex watched the scene unfold on his HUD. He saw the panicked heat signatures of the civilians. He saw the patrol patterns of the gang members. He saw the load-bearing pillars of the station's main concourse. Luther's voice crackled in his ear, transmitted via a secure channel. The stage is set, Apex. Show them the future of heroism. Apex didn't respond. He simply dropped from the rooftop, his suit's systems absorbing the impact as he landed silently in a darkened alley 2 blocks from the station. He moved through the shadows, a ghost in the machine of the city. He didn't crash through the front door. He entered through a maintenance conduit he had identified from the city's schematics, emerging inside the station's main terminal, unseen. The chaos was palpable. Civilians were huddled together, crying. 10 was standing guard over a large group, flexing his oversized muscles. Apex moved. He didn't announce himself. He didn't shout a catchphrase. He simply acted. A low-frequency sonic pulse, tuned to disorient the inner ear, emanated from his gauntlet. 10 staggered, clutching his head, his vision blurring. Before the brute could recover, a high-tensile grappling line shot from Apex's other arm, wrapping around 10's ankle. Apex anchored the other end to a support pillar and, with a flick of his wrist, activated the line's winch. 10 was yanked off his feet and slammed headfirst into the concrete pillar with a sickening crunch. Neutralized. Time elapsed, 4.7 seconds. Jack was the next to notice him, spinning around with his energy sword humming. Who the hell are you? Apex's HUD instantly analyzed the blade's energy frequency and composition. Unstable plasma arc, contained by a magnetic field. Emitter is in the hilt. He didn't engage in a duel. He closed the distance in a blur of motion, his own gauntlet emitting a counter-frequency pulse. Jack's blade sputtered, destabilized, and shorted out in a shower of sparks. As the swordsman stared at his powerless hilt in shock, Apex delivered a single, precise chop to the side of his neck, striking the vagus nerve. Jack collapsed, unconscious before he hit the ground. Time elapsed, 3.1 seconds. He's here! Queen shouted, pointing from a balcony where she and King were directing the operation. Ace, take him out. The massive robot turned, its optical sensors glowing red. It raised a cannon arm. Apex didn't wait for it to fire. He ran, not away, but directly toward the largest group of hostages. Fool! King laughed. You're cornering yourself. But Apex wasn't cornered. His HUD highlighted a massive, suspended art installation on the ceiling, a multi-ton steel sculpture. He fired 2 grappling lines into it, then fired a third at the wall behind the hostages. Activating all 3 winches simultaneously, he swung in a controlled arc, using the sculpture's mass as a counterweight. As he swung past the hostages, he hacked the station's fire suppression system. Halon gas and foam flooded the area where the hostages were, obscuring them completely, while a deafening alarm blared. Ace, its programming fixated on Apex's last known position, fired its cannon into the cloud of foam, hitting nothing. Apex landed behind the robot. His HUD had already identified the weakness he'd spotted in the schematics, an unshielded actuator in the back of the left ankle joint. He didn't try to punch the robot into submission. He drew a small, cylindrical device from his belt, a targeted explosive charge, and slapped it onto the joint. He then leaped away, detonating it. The explosion was small, precise, more of a sharp crack than a boom. The actuator shattered. The 10-foot robot, its balance compromised, toppled over like a felled tree, crashing into the far wall, away from any civilians. Systematically dismantled, King and Queen stared in horror. Their entire operation had been dismantled in under a minute by a silent, black phantom. This is impossible, King snarled. Apex was already moving. He scaled the wall to the balcony, his movements swift and silent. He neutralized them with 2 quick bursts from a cryofoam sprayer, encasing them in rapidly hardening ice from the neck down. The station fell silent, save for the blaring fire alarm and the sobbing of the hostages. Apex stood in the center of the concourse, a black silhouette amidst the foam and wreckage. He hadn't spoken a single word. He turned his attention to the civilians. He didn't offer a reassuring smile or a comforting word. He hacked the station's PA system, his own voice, filtered through the suit's modulator, coming out as a cold, synthesized baritone. The threat is neutralized. Evacuate in an orderly fashion. Exit C and D are structurally sound and clear of debris. Proceed east. Medical and law enforcement are staged 200 meters from Exit C. The message repeated on a loop. The dazed civilians, seeing the villains defeated, slowly began to move, following the calm, authoritative instructions. He hadn't saved them with a smile. He had saved them with a plan. Just as the last of the civilians were being guided out by the first arriving police officers, a familiar sound cut through the air. A clean, powerful whoosh. Superman landed gently in the center of the concourse, his red cape settling perfectly around him. He took in the scene, the neutralized gang, the disabled robot, the controlled evacuation. His brow furrowed. He saw the efficiency, the precision, but he felt a profound coldness in the air. This wasn't a rescue. It was a termination of a hostile event. He turned to the black-clad figure. The newcomer stood perfectly still, his posture radiating a confidence that bordered on arrogance. Superman, ever the diplomat, offered a small, genuine smile. He extended a hand. That was incredibly efficient, he said, his voice warm. Good work. Apex looked down at the offered hand, a hand that could crush diamonds, a symbol of hope to billions. He made no move to take it. The featureless black mask tilted up, the green LED lenses seeming to narrow as they met Superman's gaze. It wasn't good, the synthesized voice replied, devoid of any emotion. It was perfect. The silence stretched between them, heavy and absolute. There's a difference. With that, Apex fired a grappling line into the shattered ceiling and vanished into the darkness, leaving Superman standing alone amidst the cold, calculated aftermath of a perfect victory. Miles away, in a darkened office at the Daily Planet, Lois Lane leaned toward her monitor, her coffee long forgotten. The first shaky cell phone videos of the Metropolis Maglev siege were flooding the internet. The new hero, the media was already calling him Apex, was all anyone was talking about. He was brutal, efficient, and utterly terrifying. But Lois wasn't focused on his methods. She was a journalist. She focused on details. She zoomed in on a high-resolution photo someone had snapped of Apex disabling Jack's sword. She ran an image enhancement filter. The gauntlet, the subtle gleam of the composite material, the way the green energy lines pulsed. It was familiar. She pulled up another file on her computer, a folder labeled LexCorp RD Publicity. It contained press releases and promotional materials from LexCorp's last Tech Expo. She scrolled through images of advanced prosthetics, new energy sources, and a prototype for a next-generation personal defense system. She put the two images side by side. The energy signature from the prototype's power cell, captured by a spectrum analyzer at the expo, was a unique, proprietary frequency. She ran a comparison program. The faint, residual energy shimmering around Apex's gauntlet in the photo. Match found. Probability, 98.7%. Lois Lane leaned back in her chair, a grim, determined look on her face. The world was cheering for a mysterious new hero. But she knew that anything connected to Lex Luthor was never that simple. Her investigation had just begun. The world, it turned out, loved a debate. In the weeks following the Maglev siege, the name Apex was on everyone's lips. He was a phantom, a ghost in the global machine, appearing without warning to dismantle threats with a chilling, surgical precision. He stopped a runaway chemical tanker in Gotham by hacking its internal braking system and rerouting its trajectory into an industrial canal, saving the port but causing a multi-million-dollar environmental cleanup. He neutralized a group of high-tech arms dealers in Paris by remotely triggering a localized EMP from a nearby power substation, frying their weapons and equipment before a single shot could be fired. There were no press conferences. No interviews. No smiling for the cameras. Just results. Cold, hard, undeniable results. And the world was utterly, terrifyingly divided. On one side stood Superman. He remained the symbol of hope, the beloved golden boy. His every action was personal, intimate. He would catch a falling child and take a moment to look them in the eye, to tell them they were safe. He would speak with firefighters, his presence a calming balm on the chaos. To his supporters, he was what a hero should be, a compassionate guardian, a protector of not just lives, but of the human spirit. On the other side was Apex. He was the symbol of progress, or as some more cynical pundits called him, the symbol of efficiency. He didn't save individuals, he managed crises. His supporters, a rapidly growing and vocal minority, saw him as the necessary evolution of heroism. They were engineers, logisticians, military strategists, CEOs, and anyone who believed that sentimentality was a luxury one couldn't afford when lives were on the line. They pointed to the data. In Apex-resolved incidents, civilian casualties were consistently zero. Property damage, while sometimes high, was always strategically calculated to prevent a greater catastrophe. Lex Luthor, from his gleaming tower, masterfully fanned the flames. Superman represents an outdated, reactive model of heroism, he stated in a primetime interview with Cat Grant, his expression one of sober, intellectual concern. He is a firefighter, rushing to a blaze that is already raging. Apex represents a proactive, systemic approach. He is the architect who designs the building with fireproof materials in the first place. Who would you rather trust with your safety? The man who pulls you from the fire, or the one who ensures the fire never starts? The narrative was intoxicatingly simple, and it was working. Even pro-heroes, the bedrock of society's sanctioned power, were divided. Endeavor, a man who had built his entire career on the concept of overwhelming power and results, was caught on a hot mic admitting, the methods are unorthodox. But you can't argue with the numbers. Hawks, ever the pragmatist, was more publicly circumspect, but intelligence reports from the Hero Public Safety Commission showed a deep and growing interest in Apex's predictive threat analysis capabilities. The ideological battleground needed a crucible, a singular event that would force the two philosophies into a direct, unignorable collision. It came on a Tuesday afternoon. The San Andreas Fault, a slumbering giant, had finally stirred. A 9.1 magnitude earthquake ripped through the heart of Metropolis. Not a tremor, but a violent, catastrophic tearing of the Earth's crust. The city, a marvel of modern architecture, screamed as it broke apart. Skyscrapers, built to withstand a standard quake, groaned and swayed like mortally wounded beasts. The initial shockwave shattered tens of thousands of windows, sending a lethal rain of glass down onto the panicked streets. Izuku was in the Prometheus Project sublevel, running a combat simulation against the holographic Superman. His suit, now his second skin, was synced to his neural pathways. He felt the tremor not through the ground, but as a flicker of red on his HUD, a seismic alert from a global network of sensors. Code red, Luther's voice, preternaturally calm, came through his comm. This is it, Apex. The ultimate test case. Show them. Izuku didn't need to be told. The simulation vanished. In its place, a three-dimensional, real-time wireframe model of Metropolis bloomed in the center of the room. It was a hellscape of data. Red zones indicated collapsing structures. Flashing icons represented ruptured gas lines. A shimmering blue overlay showed the panicked, chaotic flow of human life. His mind, amplified by the suit's processors, absorbed it all in a nanosecond. The sheer scale of the disaster was breathtaking. It was a problem too big for any one person to solve, which was exactly the point. Clark Kent was having lunch with Lois Lane at a small diner when the world started to end. The coffee in his cup sloshed, then leaped into the air as the entire building bucked violently. The sound was a deafening, grinding roar, the protest of 1 billion tons of concrete and steel being torn apart. There was no thought. Only action. He was out of his seat and out of the building in a blur of motion so fast it was invisible. He rose into the sky, the pandemonium of the city spread out below him. It was a vision from Dante's Inferno. Buildings leaned at impossible angles, plumes of dust and smoke rose from 100 different points, and the screams of the terrified were a single, high-pitched keen that tore at his superhearing. His focus narrowed. The Metropolis General Hospital. The East Wing, filled with patients too ill to be moved, was shearing away from the main structure. He shot toward it, a blue and red missile of pure intent. He arrived just as a massive section of the facade broke free. He positioned himself beneath it, braced his shoulders, and caught a 10,000-ton slab of falling concrete as if it were a medicine ball. The strain was immense, even for him. His boots cracked the pavement below. He held it there, a human pillar, while nurses and doctors, their faces masks of terror and disbelief, scrambled to evacuate the patients. A little girl, being carried by her mother, looked back at him, her eyes wide. He gave her a reassuring wink. "It's okay," he mouthed. "I've got you." This was his way. Personal. Intimate. One life at a time, hand to hand, face to face. He was a shield. A rock. He would stand against the tide and save as many as he could. After clearing the hospital wing, he flew to a toppling skyscraper, the LexCorp Tower itself, and physically pushed against its side, his muscles straining to counteract the catastrophic momentum of its fall. He was saving thousands, but he was a single man against an apocalypse. He could only be in one place at a time. Apex did not fly into the heart of the chaos. He didn't need to. His command center was a quiet, abandoned office building 5 blocks from the epicenter, one his systems had identified as structurally sound. He stood before a shattered window, his arms outstretched, not in a heroic pose, but like a conductor before a turbulent orchestra. Around him, the air hummed. Dozens, then hundreds, of LexCorp drones, disguised as standard delivery and maintenance models, rose into the sky from hidden depots all across the city. They were his eyes, his hands, his voice. A live feed from every drone streamed directly into his helmet, his mind processing 1,000 different viewpoints at once. "The problem is not the collapsing buildings," he muttered, his voice a low hum within the helmet. "The problem is the uncontrolled movement of the populace. Panic is the secondary disaster." His strategy was not to stop the collapses. It was to get people out of the way before they happened. Rerouting all civilian foot traffic, he commanded, his thoughts translating into instant digital orders. The drones descended. They didn't lift people. They became traffic cops. Their holographic projectors flashed simple, clear instructions onto the dusty air. "Danger, turn left. Safe zone 200 m. Their speakers broadcast his synthesized voice, calm and authoritative, cutting through the screams. "This street is projected to collapse in 97 seconds. Evacuate east. Do not stop for belongings. Move now." A group of people were trapped on a crumbling overpass. Superman was miles away, holding up a building. The pro-hero on the scene, a rookie named Uraraka Achiko, was using her zero-gravity quirk to float people down one by one, her face pale with strain. She was saving them, but it was too slow. The overpass groaned, ready to give way. Apex's HUD flagged the unstable structure. He didn't send a drone to help her. He sent a single, coded command to the city's water main controls. 2 blocks away, a massive pipe beneath the street deliberately ruptured. A geyser of water erupted, a controlled flood that forced the panicked crowd on the street below to scatter, clearing the area beneath the overpass. Then, he sent a second command. Small, precisely placed demolition charges in the overpass's support pillars, charges planted years ago as part of a LexCorp urban renewal contract, detonated. The overpass didn't crumble chaotically. It fell exactly where he intended, collapsing into the now empty street below, a ramp of rubble instead of a tomb of concrete. Uraraka and the last few civilians scrambled down to safety, shocked and confused. He blew it up, Uraraka stammered, looking at the wreckage. But she couldn't deny it. Everyone was alive. Apex's cold calculus continued. His systems identified a series of cascading gas line explosions threatening to engulf a 3-block residential area. Superman would have flown in, using his super breath to extinguish the flames, a heroic but temporary solution. Apex saw the bigger picture. He targeted a single, empty skyscraper, one his sensors confirmed was evacuated. It was already leaning precariously. Using a high-frequency sonic pulse from a specialized drone, he shattered the building's remaining foundational supports. The tower fell, not with a random crash, but like a perfectly felled tree. It landed directly across the path of the spreading fires, a massive, multi-million-dollar firebreak of steel and concrete. It was an act of ruthless, breathtaking destruction. $1 billion building and a city block were sacrificed. A residential district of 50,000 people was saved. The cost of saving one was the death of 4 others. The goal is to minimize loss. It is the only goal that matters. Luther's words echoed in his mind, no longer a lesson, but a mantra. The entire crisis, from the first tremor to the last aftershock, lasted 17 minutes. In that time, Superman had personally, physically saved an estimated 1,200 people. He was a legend, a god made flesh, holding the world together with his bare hands. Apex, from his quiet command post, had coordinated the safe evacuation of over 300,000. In the aftermath, the city was a ruin, but the ideological war had just begun. LexCorp's PR machine, a beast of terrifying efficiency, went into overdrive. They released the drone footage, the data streams, the predictive models. They showed the world not a hero, but a system. What you are seeing, a LexCorp spokesperson explained on a global news broadcast, is the future of crisis management. While we have the deepest respect for the efforts of Superman and other pro-heroes, their methods are fundamentally analog in a digital world. Apex did not just save lives, he managed a catastrophe on a systemic level. This is heroism as a science. Side-by-side comparisons flooded the net. On the left, shaky phone footage of Superman, a single, powerful figure, catching a falling bus. On the right, a clean, multi-angle drone feed showing Apex's system rerouting 10,000 people away from a collapsing subway tunnel. Superman's actions were viscerally heroic, a shot of pure adrenaline to the heart. Apex's were clinically effective, appealing to the cold, hard logic of the brain. The public debate was ferocious. Superman saved my family. He looked right at me. One survivor tearfully told a reporter. He's a real hero. Apex saved my entire neighborhood, countered a man in a business suit, standing in front of the skyscraper Apex had sacrificed. I lost my office. My company might go bankrupt, but my wife and kids are alive because that hero made a hard choice. I'll take that trade any day. Izuku watched it all from his underground sanctuary. He saw the polling numbers, the shifting public opinion. He felt a cold, intoxicating flush of victory. He had proven his point. He had shown the world that a mind was a greater weapon than a fist, no matter how powerful that fist might be. His dream of being one was no longer about popularity or brute strength. It was about being the most effective. And by that metric, he had just won. But the victory felt sterile. His systems flagged a local news report. He zoomed in. A reporter was interviewing a woman in a makeshift triage center. She was frantic, her face streaked with tears and dust. "I don't understand," she sobbed. "The drone said to evacuate east. We did what it said. We're safe. But my husband, he works on the 84th floor of the O'Hara building. He called me, he said the stairwell was blocked. He was waiting for help." Izuku's blood ran cold. He pulled up the data for the O'Hara building. His systems had marked it as structurally compromised but low priority for direct intervention, as the evacuation protocols should have cleared the building. He cross-referenced it with the city's employment database. He saw the husband's name. Then he cross-referenced it with the casualty reports. And then he saw him. He scrubbed through footage from a news helicopter. There, on the 84th floor, a man was waving from a shattered window. And then, a blue and red streak. Superman, having just secured the LexCorp tower, had heard the man's cries from half a city away. He had phased through the wall, picked up the man, and flown him to safety just moments before the floor collapsed. The man in the footage was now standing next to his weeping wife, holding her tight. Safe. Apex's system had marked that man as an acceptable loss. A rounding error in a massive equation of survival. His perfect system had a fatal flaw. It couldn't account for the immeasurable value of a single human life. He had saved the city, but Superman had saved the person. The cold victory in his chest curdled into something sour and unsettling. He had won the strategic battle, but he was starting to feel like he was losing the war, a war he was only just beginning to understand. His thoughts were interrupted by an incoming public broadcast. It was a feed from a press conference being held by the Hero Public Safety Commission. On the podium was a collection of pro-heroes, their faces grim. And among them was a young woman in a pink and black costume, her brown hair cut in a bob. Uraraka Achiko. Her agency had been one of the first responders at the overpass. A reporter asked her, "Gravity hero, Uravity. You were on the scene at the 87W overpass. Apex deliberately destroyed it. What's your take on his methods?" Uraraka stepped up to the microphone, her hands trembling slightly. She took a deep breath. "His actions, they were effective," she admitted, her voice shaking but clear. "He saved everyone who was on that bridge with me. I couldn't have done that. Not that fast." A murmur went through the press. This was a stunning admission from a traditional hero. But then her expression hardened, and she looked directly into the camera. "But then I spent the next hour on the ground, helping people. And I saw Superman. He wasn't just holding up buildings. He was holding people's hands. He was calming down scared children. He was using his X-ray vision to find people trapped in the rubble that no sensor could detect. Apex saved us from the disaster. But Superman, he saved us from our despair." She paused, tears welling in her eyes. "A hero's job isn't just to make sure we survive. It's to remind us why we want to. It's about compassion. And I didn't see any compassion today from Apex. I saw a spreadsheet." Izuku slammed his fist against the console. The reinforced metal buckled slightly under the suit's enhanced strength. Uraraka. He hadn't seen her in years, but he recognized her instantly. The kind girl from his middle school entrance exam. The one he had saved. The one who had, in turn, saved him. Her words struck a nerve that all of Luther's cold logic couldn't sever. A spreadsheet. Is that all he was now? A walking, talking spreadsheet of life and death? He had set out to prove humanity's superiority. But in his quest for cold, perfect efficiency, he had stripped away the very thing that made him human. His victory felt hollow, the taste of ash in his mouth. He was Apex. He was the future. He had won. So why did he feel like he had lost? The rivalry was no longer just about power versus intellect. It was now about results versus humanity. And for the first time, Izuku Midoriya was forced to confront the terrifying possibility that in his quest to become Superman's greatest rival, he had chosen the wrong side. Katsuki Bakugo was not a man given to introspection. His worldview was a simple, explosive binary. You were either a winner or a loser. You were either aiming for the top, or you were a pebble on the side of the mountain he was climbing. For years, the peak of that mountain had been All Might. Then, for a brief, frustrating period, it had been the impossible, godlike specter of Superman. But now, The sole focus of his incandescent rage had a new name, Apex. He despised everything about him. The silence. The cold, arrogant efficiency. The way he moved like a surgeon when a hero's work was meant to be a visceral, passionate storm. Most of all, he despised the debate he was generating. The endless news cycles, the talk shows, the internet forums, all buzzing with the question of whether this shadowy newcomer's cold-blooded calculus was superior to the heart-on-your-sleeve heroism that Bakugo had built his entire identity around. "He's a coward hiding in a tin can!" Bakugo roared, slamming his fist on the conference table at his hero agency. The impact sent a spiderweb of cracks across the polished surface. His sidekicks flinched. "He's a glorified drone pilot who gets his kicks from blowing up city blocks. He's not a hero. He's a damn accountant with a weapons budget." What truly galled him, what scraped like sandpaper against his soul, was the praise Apex received from people who should have known better. Endeavor's grudging respect was a betrayal. The public's fascination was an insult. It felt like the world was collectively losing its mind, trading a real, roaring fire for the sterile, green glow of a computer screen. The final straw came during a joint mission debrief. A high-ranking member of the Hero Public Safety Commission was presenting a statistical analysis of the Metropolis earthquake response. "As you can see," the commissioner said, pointing to a complex graph, "while Superman's individual rescue count was impressive, the system-wide casualty prevention model implemented by Apex was, by an order of magnitude, more effective. We are looking at a paradigm shift in urban crisis management." Bakugo felt a familiar, hot pressure build behind his eyes. He saw the nods of agreement from some of the other heroes in the room. He saw the cold, impartial numbers on the screen declaring his entire philosophy of overwhelming personal victory to be inefficient, obsolete. He stood up so abruptly his chair screeched backward. All eyes turned to him. "Bullshit," he snarled. The room fell silent. "You want to talk about paradigms? Here's one. A hero shows his face. A hero puts his own body on the line. He doesn't hide behind an army of toys and a calculator. This Apex is a fraud. And I'm going to prove it." He stormed out of the room before anyone could stop him. His mind was made up. He wasn't just going to defeat Apex. He was going to break him, live, in front of the entire world. He would peel open that tin can and show everyone the weak, pathetic man hiding inside. He would remind them what a real hero looked like. He issued the challenge that afternoon. It wasn't a formal request through hero channels. It was pure Bakugo. He hijacked a news broadcast by landing on the roof of the studio, grabbed the microphone from a stunned reporter, and stared directly into the camera, his eyes burning with raw fury. "Apex! You think you're so damn smart? You think you're better than us? Then prove it. No drones. No cheap tricks. Just you and me. The Old Port District. Sundown tomorrow. I'm going to show the world you're nothing more than a coward in a suit." The world exploded. It was the matchup everyone had been secretly craving, the 7 Pro hero, the walking embodiment of explosive, instinctual power, versus the enigmatic, intellectual phantom. The unstoppable force versus the, well, no one was quite sure what Apex was. An immovable object? A thinking weapon? The fight was instantly billed as the ultimate clash of styles, of philosophies, of generations. In the Prometheus Project facility, Izuku watched the broadcast on a massive holographic screen. Bakugo's face, contorted with rage, filled his vision. Kaken. The name was a ghost on his lips, a relic from a life he had murdered in a rainy alley. A predictable, emotional outburst. Luther's voice commented from the shadows of the command center. He stepped into the light, a chess master observing a pawn's aggressive but foolish move. Bakugo is a blunt instrument. Powerful, but utterly without finesse. He's attempting to force you onto his terms, a direct physical confrontation. He's challenging the suit, Izuku said, his voice the calm, modulated tone of Apex. He believes the technology is my only advantage, and is he wrong? Luther asked, a subtle barb in his question. Izuku turned away from the screen. He's not just challenging the suit. He's challenging the intellect that controls it. He thinks power is everything. I will demonstrate that it is a single, crude variable in a much larger equation. So you'll accept? I will do more than accept, Apex stated. I will use this opportunity to deliver a message. That raw power, untempered by strategy, is a liability. That instinct is a pale shadow of analysis, Luther smiled. Excellent. This is more than a fight, it's a branding opportunity. A public execution of an outdated ideal. Don't just defeat him, Apex. Humiliate him. Make him a lesson for the entire world. Izuku felt a faint, cold tremor in his hands. Humiliate him. The idea should have been satisfying. Kaken, his lifelong tormentor, the source of 1,000 cuts to his soul, brought low, but the thought brought no pleasure. It felt tragic. A necessary, but deeply unpleasant, calculation. He spent the next 24 hours not in physical training, but in deep analysis. He didn't need to train his body. He needed to sharpen his mind. He pulled up every file, every scrap of data he had ever collected on Katsuki Bakugo. He had been studying him his entire life. It was his oldest, most ingrained habit. He watched footage of Bakugo's fights, his HUD breaking down his movements, his attack patterns, his tells. AP stun, 0.8 second charge time, indicated by a subtle shift in his right shoulder. Howitzer impact, requires a 360-degree rotation to build momentum. The initial spin is always counterclockwise. A predictable trajectory, reliance on right-hand power strikes. Left hand is used primarily for balance and smaller, faster explosions for mobility. Psychological trigger, the word Deku. Causes a spike in adrenaline and a measurable decrease in tactical discipline. He knew Kaken better than Kaken knew himself. He knew his strengths, his weaknesses, his fears, his pride. He wasn't just planning to fight a hero. He was preparing to dismantle a person. The sun bled across the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and bruised purple. The abandoned port district was a graveyard of rust and decay, the skeletons of forgotten cranes reaching into the twilight sky. The air was thick with the smell of salt and old iron. This was Bakugo's chosen arena, a chaotic landscape of shipping containers, warehouses, and broken concrete. A place where raw power could reign. Thousands of news helicopters and broadcast drones filled the sky, their lights turning the district into a massive, open-air television studio. The world was holding its breath. Bakugo stood in the center of a large, open plaza, his arms crossed, his face a mask of simmering impatience. His hero costume, all sharp angles and grenade-themed gauntlets, looked perfectly at home amidst the industrial decay. Then he appeared. Apex didn't arrive with a dramatic flourish. He simply walked out from behind a stack of shipping containers, a shadow given form. He moved with a silent, fluid grace that was unnervingly calm. Finally decided to show your face, you coward? Bakugo snarled, a plume of smoke curling from his palms. Or is that just another one of your remote-controlled toys? Apex stopped 50 meters away. The featureless black helmet tilted slightly. Katsuki Bakugo. Quirk, explosion. A powerful but inefficient ability. High collateral damage risk. Prone to emotional escalation. The clinical breakdown was like a splash of gasoline on Bakugo's fire. I'll show you inefficient! He didn't wait for a signal. He launched himself forward, a comet of orange and black. His hands erupted in a series of staccato blasts, propelling him through the air in a wild, unpredictable pattern. Die! To the millions watching, it was a terrifying, overwhelming assault. To Apex, it was a data stream, trajectory analysis, erratic. Target, center mass. Evasion protocol, activated. Apex didn't dodge. He flowed. As Bakugo closed the distance, Apex took a single, fluid step to his left, his body moving with the preternatural grace of a matador. Bakugo's explosive charge carried him past, the heat of the blast washing over Apex's suit without effect. Bakugo landed, spun on his heel, and unleashed another, wider blast. Apex didn't retreat. He advanced, dropping into a low slide, the explosion passing harmlessly over his head. His HUD highlighted a dozen variables in an instant. Bakugo's weight distribution, the tension in his calves, the subtle shift in his gaze. Predictive analysis, Follow-up attack will be a low sweep with the left hand to force me airborne. As Bakugo's left palm swung low, crackling with energy, Apex was already moving. He pushed off the ground, not jumping, but launching himself from his crouch, his armored boot connecting solidly with Bakugo's extended wrist. It wasn't a damaging blow, but it was precise, knocking the aim of the blast just enough to send it plowing into the ground, kicking up a shower of dirt and concrete. "Stand still and fight me!" Bakugo roared, his frustration mounting. He was fighting a ghost, a phantom that was always one step ahead. "Fighting you would be inefficient," Apex's synthesized voice stated calmly. "I am dismantling you." He began his counterattack. It was not a flurry of blows. It was a systematic deconstruction. As Bakugo prepared his signature AP shot, Apex's gauntlet emitted a high-frequency pulse. It wasn't an EMP. His analysis had shown Bakugo's gauntlets were purely mechanical. It was a sonic resonator, tuned to the specific frequency of the pin mechanism that controlled the release of his nitroglycerin-like sweat. The mechanism seized. Bakugo pulled the pin, but nothing happened. He stared at his gauntlet in confusion, a fatal hesitation. In that half-second of shock, Apex closed the distance. He didn't throw a punch. He moved like a surgeon. 2 quick, hard strikes with his fingertips, one to the cluster of nerves on Bakugo's bicep, causing his entire right arm to go numb and useless. The other to a pressure point just below his ear. Bakugo's vision swam, his equilibrium thrown into chaos. He staggered back, shaking his head, trying to clear the sudden wave of vertigo. What did you do?" "I am exploiting design flaws," Apex replied, his voice a cold monotone. Enraged and disoriented, Bakugo fell back on his rawest power. He began to spin, building momentum for his howitzer impact, his ultimate move. He became a human tornado, a whirlwind of explosions and furious energy. Howitzer impact. Charge time, 3.2 seconds. Trajectory, predictable arc countermeasure, environmental manipulation. Apex didn't try to meet the attack head-on. He turned his attention to a nearby crane, its rusted hook dangling precariously overhead. He fired a single, high-tensile line from his gauntlet, the magnetic clamp locking onto the crane's main support beam. As Bakugo launched himself into the air, a spiraling inferno, Apex activated the winch. He pulled. The ancient, rusted bolts holding the support beam screamed in protest. With a groan of tortured metal, the massive crane arm tilted, swinging its multi-ton hook directly into the path of the airborne Bakugo. Bakugo, his focus absolute on his target, saw it too late. He tried to alter his trajectory, but his momentum was too great. He collided with the swinging hook with catastrophic force. There was a sickening crunch of metal on metal as his own gauntlets, designed for offense, offered little protection. The impact shattered his spin and sent him tumbling through the air, crashing into a mountain of shipping containers. The world watched in stunned silence. The unstoppable Katsuki Bakugo had been swatted out of the sky like a fly. He slumped to the ground, his costume torn, his body bruised and battered. He pushed himself to his knees, coughing, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. He was defeated. He knew it, but his pride, the furious, burning core of his being, would not let him quit. Is that all you've got?" he gasped, trying to push himself to his feet. Apex landed softly in front of him, his black suit untouched, his posture radiating an unnerving calm. He looked down at the broken hero, the boy who had once lorded over him with casual cruelty. He could have ended it there. He could have walked away, his victory absolute. But Luther's voice echoed in his memory. Humiliate him. Make him a lesson. This was the final calculation. The psychological blow. Apex's helmet retracted with a soft hiss, revealing his face to the world for the first time. The drones and helicopters zoomed in. The face was lean, intense, framed by messy green-black hair. It was a face no one recognized. Except for one person. Bakugo's eyes widened, first in confusion, then in dawning, horrifying disbelief. He saw the faint dusting of freckles. He saw the shape of the eyes. He saw the face of the useless, quirkless, worthless boy he had tormented his entire life. Deku! The name was a choked, strangled sound, stripped of all its venom, leaving only pure, unadulterated shock. It was impossible. It was a nightmare. Izuku looked down at his fallen rival, and for the first time, a flicker of his own voice, not the cold monotone of Apex, came through the suit's external speakers. It was quiet, laced with a decade of pain and a cold, cutting pity. "You're still just swinging, Kaken," he said, the childhood nickname twisting like a knife. "All that power, all that rage, and you never learned to think." The words struck Bakugo with more force than the crane hook. They shattered something deep inside him, something far more fundamental than his bones or his pride. It was the foundation of his entire world, the certainty that he was superior, the belief that Deku was a pebble. But the pebble had become a mountain, and it had just crushed him without effort. He wasn't just defeated. He was invalidated. His entire life, his struggle, his power, it was all rendered meaningless in the face of this ghost from his past. He slumped forward, his strength gone, his will broken. He didn't even have the energy to be angry. There was only a vast, hollow emptiness. Izuku stood over him, the victor. But the triumph he had expected was absent. There was no satisfaction. There was only the bitter, metallic taste of a tragedy he had authored. He had won. He had proven his point. He had humiliated his lifelong rival. And he felt nothing but a profound, aching sorrow. He had set out to become a symbol, and he had become a monster. He was about to turn and leave, to retreat back into the shadows of Apex, when a sound made him freeze. It was the same sound from the sludge villain incident, a clean, powerful whoosh that was almost silent. Superman landed between him and the kneeling Bakugo. He didn't look at Izuku. His gaze was fixed on the broken form of the young hero. He knelt, placing a gentle hand on Bakugo's shoulder. His back was to Izuku, a living shield of blue and red, protecting Bakugo not from a physical threat, but from further humiliation. The gesture was simple, instinctive, and radiated a powerful, unspoken condemnation. For the first time that night, Superman turned his head, and his blue eyes met Izuku's. The disappointment in them was a physical weight, heavier than any judgment, more painful than any blow. There was no anger. Only a deep, profound sadness. "This wasn't saving anyone," Superman said, his voice quiet but carrying the force of a thunderclap in the sudden silence. "This wasn't a lesson." He looked from Izuku's advanced, perfect suit to the broken boy on the ground, and his next words struck Izuku harder than any of Bakugo's explosions. "This was cruelty." The word hung in the air, absolute and undeniable. Cruelty. In his quest to prove his intellectual superiority, in his cold adherence to Luther's philosophy, he had committed the one sin a hero never could. He hadn't just defeated an opponent. He had intentionally, systematically, and publicly destroyed a person. His helmet snapped back into place, hiding his face, hiding the sudden, shameful sting in his eyes. He had wanted to be Superman's rival, to prove himself his equal. But in that moment, standing before the quiet compassion of the alien and the wreckage of his own making, he had never felt smaller. The world's verdict was swift and brutal. Apex had won the fight, but Superman had won the moral victory. The image of Superman shielding a broken Bakugo was everywhere. It became an icon, a symbol of compassionate strength against cold, intellectual cruelty. Pundits and heroes who had once praised Apex's efficiency now condemned his methods. Uravity's words from the earthquake aftermath, "I didn't see any compassion. I saw a spreadsheet," were replayed endlessly, now carrying the weight of prophecy. The reveal of Apex's face, meant to be a moment of triumph, had backfired. He was no longer just an enigma. He was a person, a young man who had publicly and systematically dismantled his childhood rival. It wasn't heroic. It was a vendetta. Izuku felt the shift like a change in barometric pressure. He had followed Luther's instructions to the letter. He had demonstrated the superiority of intellect over brute force. He had made his lesson, but the world hadn't learned the lesson he intended. They had learned to fear him. He stood in the center of the Prometheus Project's main chamber, the suit's helmet retracted, watching the news cycle on a dozen holographic screens. His face was a stoic mask, but inside, a chaotic storm was raging. Superman's final word, cruelty, was a shard of ice lodged in his heart. It was a truth he couldn't analyze his way out of. Public opinion is a fickle beast, Lex Luthor's voice purred from behind him. He walked into the chamber, a glass of what looked like expensive scotch in his hand, his demeanor as unruffled as ever. They cheer for the gladiator, but they weep for the lion. Do not mistake their sentimentality for a valid critique of your methods. They see me as a villain, Izuku stated, his voice flat. They see you as a threat, Luthor corrected him. Which you are. A threat to the comfortable, simplistic notion that a single, godlike being is the answer to all our problems. You have proven that a man can defeat a Superman. Now, it is time to prove that a man can control a god. Luthor gestured, and a sterile, white robotic arm emerged from a panel in the wall. It held a small case, not of expensive leather, but of thick, dull lead, about the size of a shoebox. It presented the case to Izuku. The public may be turning, but our timeline has accelerated, Luthor said, his eyes gleaming with a feverish intensity Izuku had never seen before. The Bakugo incident proved your capabilities. Now, we proceed to the endgame. Phase 3. Izuku looked at the lead-line box. His suit's sensors immediately detected faint, exotic radiation leaking from it, an energy signature his database instantly flagged. It was a chaotic, unstable waveform, utterly alien. What is this? Izuku asked, though a cold dread was already coiling in his stomach. This, Luthor said, his voice dropping to a reverent whisper, is the key. The great equalizer. The physical manifestation of a fundamental truth, that for every god, there is a reckoning. For every sun, there is a shadow. With a soft hiss, the lead box opened. Nestled on a bed of black velvet was a dagger. But it was unlike any weapon Izuku had ever seen. The blade was not metal, but a jagged, crystalline shard, roughly 8 inches long. It glowed with an internal, sickly green light, pulsing like a diseased heart. The light seemed to cast the entire chamber in a nauseating, viridian hue, making the polished chrome look like algae-slicked stone. The air around it felt wrong, vibrating with a low, dissonant hum that made the teeth ache. It was solidified poison. It was beautiful and horrifying in equal measure. Kryptonite, Izuku breathed, the name feeling like a curse on his tongue. It was the great mystery, the ultimate rumor surrounding Superman. A substance believed to be from his destroyed homeworld, the one thing in the universe that could harm him. Synthesized, Luthor clarified, a proud, proprietary tone in his voice. Perfected. My scientists have been working on this since the day he arrived, reverse engineering the trace elements found in the atmospheric residue of his scout ship's engine core. It emits a specific wavelength of radiation that catastrophically destabilizes Kryptonian cellular structure. To him, this is not a knife. It is a shard of pure cancer. Izuku stared at the glowing green blade. The old, fanboy part of him, the boy who had filled notebooks with trivia and theories, was morbidly fascinated. The analytical part of his mind was already calculating the radiation's decay rate, its effective range, its potential applications. But the hero, the small, buried part of him that had once dreamed of saving people with a smile, was screaming in silent horror. This wasn't a weapon. It was anathema. It was a tool made for one purpose, to kill a god. He reached out a hesitant, ungloved hand. As his fingers drew near the crystal, he felt it. It was like putting his hand near a block of dry ice, a cold that felt like it was burning him. But it was more than that. It was a feeling of profound wrongness, an alien sickness that seemed to seep into his bones. I don't understand, Izuku said, pulling his hand back. My purpose was to prove humanity's superiority through intellect. To be his rival. This is just a poison. A bigger stick. It proves nothing. You misunderstand its purpose, Luthor said patiently, as if explaining a simple concept to a child. This is not for an assassination. This is a deterrent. A leash. The world lives in fear of what Superman could do. What if he decided our laws no longer applied to him? What if his compassion led him to become a dictator, enforcing his will for our own good? Who could stop him? He gestured to the dagger. This is the check on his absolute power. It is planetary security. It is the single most important invention in human history. It is the tool that ensures mankind remains the master of its own destiny. And you, Apex, are the only one with the skill, the precision, and the dispassionate will to wield it. The logic was, as always with Luther, cold, clean, and terrifyingly seductive. To control a god. To hold the leash. It was the ultimate expression of the apex philosophy. But it felt wrong. It felt like a perversion of his original goal. He wanted to be a hero, the greatest hero. Heroes didn't hold kill switches over other heroes. I won't kill him, Izuku stated, his voice hard. I am not asking you to, Luther replied smoothly. I am asking you to be prepared. To be the guardian who stands ready for the day the god falters. Take it. Integrate it into your suit. Let it be a symbol of your authority. Reluctantly, Izuku took the dagger. The hilt was a cool, metallic alloy, but the blade pulsed with that sickening energy, a tangible illness in his hand. He felt as if he were holding the collected sins of an entire world. As his suit's gauntlet closed around the hilt, a small panel opened, and a micro-scanner extended, beginning a deep analysis of the crystal's composition and energy signature. He was accepting the weapon, but his mind was already, instinctively, deconstructing it. The test case for Luther's new gambit did not take long to appear. A week later, a new and terrifying villain emerged in downtown Metropolis. He was a 7-foot-tall behemoth of chrome and steel, a walking tank with a human face visible behind a reinforced visor. But the most horrifying feature was the gaping hole in his chest. In place of his heart was a pulsing, green generator, an ugly, angry star of kryptonite that cast the same sickly glow as the dagger now holstered in a lead-lined compartment on Izuku's thigh. The media, with their usual flair for the dramatic, had already christened him Metallo. He was tearing through a financial district, not robbing banks, but seemingly causing chaos for its own sake, flipping cars and punching holes in buildings. I'm looking for Superman, he roared, his voice a metallic rasp amplified by speakers. Come out and face me, alien. Superman arrived, as he always did, a streak of hope against a sky full of smoke. He landed before Metallo, his face set in a grim, determined line. This has gone far enough. Surrender now. I will, Metallo laughed, a grating, joyless sound. As soon as you're dead. He opened a panel on his chest, exposing the kryptonite heart fully. The wave of emerald radiation that washed out was palpable, visible even to the naked eye as a shimmer in the air. Superman stopped. His flight faltered, and he dropped a few inches, landing heavily on the pavement. A collective gasp went through the onlookers watching from behind police lines. A sheen of sweat broke out on his brow. The color began to drain from his face. For the first time, the world saw Superman look sick. What's wrong, hero? Metallo taunted, taking a lumbering step forward. Feeling a little under the weather? Superman gritted his teeth, pushing against the invisible tide of poison. He threw a punch. It was a blow that should have sent Metallo into the next state. But it was slow, labored. Metallo caught the fist in his huge metal hand, the impact barely registering. Pathetic, Metallo snarled, and backhanded Superman across the street. The symbol of hope crashed into the side of a bus, denting it, his movements sluggish and weak. He was being poisoned, drained of his infinite strength, and he had no defense. From a rooftop several blocks away, Apex watched the scene unfold. His HUD was a storm of alerts, the kryptonite radiation flooding his sensors. He saw Superman, the invincible god, on his knees. He saw the genuine pain and confusion in his eyes. The scenario is live, Luther's voice said in his ear. Metallo is a former LexCorp employee, a security guard named John Corbin who suffered a fatal accident. This was his second chance. He is my creation, a test. He is designed specifically to be a threat that only you can now counter. Izuku's blood ran cold. My creation. Luther hadn't just created the solution. He had created the problem. The arms dealer selling weapons to both sides of the war. The kryptonite dagger, Apex, Luther urged. Its blade is pure. It will overload Metallo's core. A single, precise strike is all it will take. This is your moment. Save him. Show the world that you are his protector, the one who holds the power to save even a god. Solidify your position. Izuku looked down at the lead-lined compartment on his thigh. He could feel the cold hum of the dagger, waiting. The logic was, as always, flawless. Rush in, stab Metallo, save Superman. He would be the hero of the day. He would prove his necessity, his superiority. His hand went to the compartment. His fingers brushed against the latch. He saw Superman, struggling to his feet, putting himself between Metallo and a group of terrified civilians. Even weakened, even dying, his first instinct was to protect others. He was a shield, even when he was shattering. Compassion is a flaw in the heroic calculus, Luthor's words echoed in his mind. But as Izuku looked at the raw, selfless heroism on display, the words felt like a lie. He saw Superman on his knees. He saw Bakugo on his knees. He saw the choice before him. He could win. He could follow the plan, secure his place, and prove Luthor's philosophy correct. He could deliver the calculated, perfect victory. Or he could be a hero. His hand recoiled from the dagger as if burned. No, this was Luthor's game, Luthor's test. And Izuku was suddenly, violently sick of playing by Luthor's rules. His rivalry with Superman was supposed to be about ideology, about proving humanity's worth. It wasn't supposed to be a rigged performance where he was the star puppet. Apex, what are you doing? Luthor's voice was sharp, demanding. Execute the plan. Izuku ignored him. His mind, that magnificent, analytical engine, kicked into overdrive, but this time it wasn't searching for the most efficient way to win. It was searching for the most effective way to save. Problem: Superman is incapacitated by kryptonite radiation. Goal: remove radiation source or shield Superman from its effects. Metallo's core is the source. Destroying it with the dagger is option A. Option B: neutralize Metallo via other means. His HUD scanned the environment, the data streams flowing. He analyzed Metallo's metallic shell. Standard titanium steel alloy. Vulnerable to extreme sonic frequencies. He analyzed the street. Underneath is a primary fiber optic data trunk for the financial district. High voltage line. He had a new plan. A plan that was his own. He leaped from the rooftop. He didn't glide. He plummeted, using his suit's grav dampeners to angle his descent like a missile. He didn't aim for Metallo. He aimed for the street directly between Metallo and Superman. He hit the asphalt with the force of a meteor. The impact shattered the pavement and sent a shockwave outwards. The ground buckled, and a trench formed between the two combatants. It wasn't just a physical barrier. It was a statement. Apex. Superman gasped, looking up in confusion. Metallo laughed. The tin soldier arrives. Have you come to watch your rival die? Analysis. Apex's synthesized voice boomed, overriding Metallo's speakers. Your power source is your weakness. Your chassis is crude. Your combat prowess is negligible. You are an inefficient design. He raised his gauntlets, not to fight, but with the palms open. They began to glow, not with green energy, but with a crackling blue light. He was overriding the suit's safety limiters, drawing power directly from its core reactor. High-frequency sonic burst. He yelled, a warning to Superman. A wave of pure, concentrated sound, visible as a distortion in the air, erupted from his hands. It wasn't a disorienting pulse like the one he used on Bakugo's gauntlet. It was a destructive wave, a sonic hammer blow. The windows of the surrounding buildings for 3 blocks instantly shattered. Metallo roared as the sonic wave hit him. It wasn't just loud, it was resonating with the specific molecular frequency of his alloy shell. Cracks, thin as hairs, began to spread across his chrome body. He staggered, clutching his head, the green glow of his core flickering. But it wasn't enough. The shell was cracking, but it was holding. Is that all you've got? Metallo grated, fighting through the sonic assault. Your toys are weak. Apex knew the sonic attack wouldn't be enough to finish him. It was just a diversion. While Metallo was focused on him, his left gauntlet was busy. A panel slid open, and a thin, diamond-tipped drill whirred to life. He slammed his hand into the shattered pavement, drilling directly into the high-voltage data trunk he had identified earlier. Sparks flew. He rerouted his suit's energy, not into the sonic emitters, but down his arm, into the drill, and directly into the city's power grid. It was an incredibly dangerous maneuver. A feedback loop could fry his suit and him with it. Now! He commanded, though he was speaking only to himself. He hacked into the city's infrastructure controls. He created a feedback loop, drawing power from 3 city blocks and shunting it all to one single point, the damaged cable beneath his hand. The street exploded. A massive surge of raw electricity erupted from the ground, arcing through the air. It wasn't a random blast. Apex, using his own suit's magnetic field generators, shaped the electrical arc, turning it into a whip of pure lightning. He directed it not at Metallo's core, but at his feet. The electricity conducted through Metallo's body, and he convulsed violently. But the true purpose wasn't just to shock him. The massive electromagnetic pulse from the arc had another effect. It created a makeshift, temporary Faraday cage, a bubble of electromagnetic interference. For a brief, 3-second window, the chaotic kryptonite radiation was dampened, its waves scrambled and contained within the electrical field. It was all the time Superman needed. The green pallor vanished from his skin. The strength flooded back into his limbs. His eyes, clear and blue again, glowed with brilliant red heat. He saw the opening Apex had created, the incredible, insane, brilliant opening. He didn't hesitate. He launched himself forward, a blur of motion, and delivered a single, full-power punch to Metallo's already cracked chest plate. The impact was cataclysmic. The sound was a deafening crack boom. Metallo's entire torso imploded. The kryptonite power core, its casing shattered, was sent flying high into the air, tumbling end over end, its green light fading as it flew away from Superman. The hollow metal shell of John Corbin collapsed into a heap of sparking, useless metal. Silence descended upon the street, broken only by the crackle of residual electricity. Izuku stood panting, his suit's power levels flashing critical red. The gamble had paid off. He looked at Superman, who was standing over the wreckage of Metallo, his cape fluttering in the breeze. For the first time, there was no disappointment in Superman's eyes. There was no sadness. There was only a look of grudging, profound respect. He had seen the dagger on Apex's thigh. He knew what he could have done. And he had chosen a different path. He had chosen to save him, not just win. "You saved me," Superman said, his voice quiet. "My analysis indicated your survival was the most efficient path to victory," Apex replied, his modulator kicking back in, the cold mask of his persona slipping back into place. But there was no conviction in it. It was a reflexive lie. "Right," Superman said, a small, knowing smile touching his lips. He knew it was more than that. "Apex," Luthor's voice, cold as the grave, crackled in his ear. "Report back to base. Immediately. We have a great deal to discuss." Izuku ignored him. He turned and fired a grappling line, swinging away into the concrete canyons of the city, leaving Superman alone with the victory. Later that night, back in the silent, sterile sanctuary of his lab, Izuku pulled the kryptonite dagger from its lead-lined sheath. He placed it under a high-resolution microscopic scanner. His gauntlet's earlier scan had given him the basic composition, but now he delved deeper. He analyzed the isotopic structure of the synthetic crystal. Every synthesis process, no matter how perfect, leaves a unique signature, a sort of fingerprint based on the specific reactor conditions, the catalyst used, the cooling process. It was a detail Luthor, in his arrogance, would have overlooked. He isolated the unique isotopic signature of the dagger. It was a complex, multi-layered code of elemental decay. Then, he accessed LexCorp's own internal servers, a feat he could now accomplish with a thought. He didn't look for files labeled kryptonite. He looked for energy resonance logs. He cross-referenced the dagger's isotopic signature against the energy output logs of every single power source in the LexCorp network. He ran the search. For a long, tense minute, the system processed gigabytes of data. Then, a result appeared on his screen. Match found. The signature wasn't from some hidden, secret weapons lab. It wasn't from a research outpost. The isotopic signature of the kryptonite dagger was a perfect match for the unique energy resonance patterns of the main power reactor in the basement of LexCorp Tower. The very heart of Luthor's public empire. The truth crashed down on Izuku with the force of a physical blow. The dagger hadn't been made in a secret lab. It was a byproduct. A planned, deliberate byproduct of the clean, safe energy that LexCorp was selling to the world. Luthor wasn't just building a weapon. He was secretly seeding his entire global infrastructure with the latent ability to produce it. He was turning the world itself into a weapon against Superman. Metallo. The public relations spin. The debate. The cruelty. The dagger. It was all a lie. All a game. Luthor wasn't his mentor. He wasn't humanity's champion. He was a puppet master. And Izuku Midoriya, the brilliant apex, was his star puppet. And he had just cut his own strings.